Welcome to This Week in Biochar, your weekly deep dive into all the exciting things happening in the biochar world. Ready to jump into the top news and research from Biochar Today?
Absolutely. Always a lot going on, always fascinating.
Well, let's jump right into it. The biggest story this week, BluSky Carbon. They signed a letter of intent for this massive new biochar project.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in Arkansas. It's potentially a $192 million deal to supply 70,000 tons of biochar.
Wow, 70,000 tons. That's a lot of biochar.
That's a lot. That's like, what, over 5,000 semi-truck trailers?
That's a big signal, Shows the demand for biochar is really growing, especially for these big carbon removal projects.
Just for those who need a refresher, biochar. It's that super stable form of charcoal, right? You're heating up biomass like wood chips or crop residues,
Yeah.
but in a low oxygen environment.
Uh-huh.
And then it's got a ton of uses, soil health, filtering water.
Yeah, definitely. And this BluSky Carbon project, what I find really interesting is their plan. They want to install 5 Vulcan-heavy biomass pyrolysis systems.
Yeah.
5. To hit that 70,000-ton target, those systems, they're known for their high throughput and efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, they've already got the land, a 25-year lease, and they've got a proposal to source like 500,000 tons of biomass annually from the local forestry industry.
Wow, so they are thinking long term.
They're thinking way ahead. That's way more than they need for this project.
Yeah, that extra feedstock, it gives them a lot of options. Maybe future expansion or even working with other companies who want to use biochar.
Yeah, and the deal, it lays out some of the key terms like you'd be responsible for the transport, picking it up from the site. Payments are net 60 days. And then there are the usual clauses for breaches of contract, legal stuff if someone doesn't hold up their end of the deal.
Yeah, standard stuff. But overall, this kind of project, this scale, it could really shake things up in the biochar industry. It could drive more innovation, bring down production costs, maybe lead to even wider adoption of biochar.
Yeah, definitely a signal that biochar is becoming, less of a niche thing and more mainstream.
Absolutely.
Let's shift gears a bit now. Talk about people. We've got a new face over at Biochar Today, Dr. Shanthi Prabha. She's taking on the role as science editor.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about her.
Yeah, she's an environmental scientist and has a really interesting way of approaching biochar research.
Her work on those invasive wetland weeds, turning them into biochar, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Tackling 2 problems at once, Managing those invasive species and then creating a valuable soil amendment.
Yeah, and she's really big on making science accessible to like everybody.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, which is something we definitely value.
I think with her expertise and how she writes, she's going to be a great addition to Biochar Today, and really the whole biochar community will benefit.
In her interview, she talked about like when she was a kid, she loved those science magazines
Oh, that's great.
and how she went from zoology to environmental science. It wasn't like a straight path.
Yeah, those winding paths are often the most interesting.
And she told a story about making her first batch of biochar with her dad using rubber wood, like at home.
Oh, that's so cool. Clearly she has a passion for this.
Yeah, real passion. Now, switching gears again to some of the science-y stuff, a new research paper, actually it's by Jay Lehman and others. It just came out in Science Direct, I think it was.
Right.
It really caught our eye. They're exploring all these different approaches to soil rejuvenation, and how crucial biochar is and all of that.
Yeah, soil health is a big topic these days, right? Degradation, overuse of chemical fertilizers, the need for more sustainable practices. It's an area ripe for innovation.
Totally. And this paper, it really positions biochar as like a key player in these soil regeneration strategies.
Interesting.
Yeah, they covered a wide range of biochar production methods from the standard pyrolysis to newer techniques like hydrothermal carbonization
Okay.
and retort carbonization, which are really interesting because they can work at lower temperatures and still produce biochar with some pretty amazing properties.
Lower temperatures, that's always good. More energy efficient.
Yeah, exactly. And they break down how, the type of feedstock, the temperature, even how fast you heat it up. It all plays a role in what kind of biochar you end up with.
So understanding those production factors, that's really key for folks who want to use biochar. They can tailor it to their specific needs. Like if you need to improve water retention, there's a biochar for that. If you want to increase carbon sequestration, there's a biochar for that too.
Right. It's not one size fits all. This research gives a sort of roadmap for how to optimize biochar for all these different uses.
A roadmap, I like that. It's a good analogy. This paper, it really goes deep into the science. But one of the big takeaways is how biochar can really change the game for soil health. They looked at like tons of field experiments, and they found that biochar, on average, it increased crop productivity by 11%.
Wow, 11%. That's a pretty big jump, especially when you think about all the pressure on farmers to, get more yield, but also be more sustainable.
Exactly. And it's not just like a general boost. They found that legumes, those saw the biggest improvement, a 30% increase, then vegetables, 29%.
So it's really targeted.
Yeah, so farmers can use this data, figure out which crops might benefit the most from biochar.
So how does biochar actually do all this, improve the soil? The paper gets into the details of like how it works on a physical and chemical level.
It's pretty cool. So biochar, it's kind of like a sponge. It helps the soil hold air and water better.
Like it makes the soil breathe better.
Yeah, exactly. Creates a better environment for roots to grow, helps with nutrient uptake.
So it's not just about the structure. They talk about the chemical properties too, like this thing called cation exchange capacity.
Yeah, cation exchange capacity. It's basically how well the soil can hold on to nutrients and make them available to plants. Think of it like tiny magnets. They attract and hold on to the nutrients that plants need.
I see.
So biochar increases those magnets so the soil can hold on to more nutrients.
So it's not just like adding stuff to the soil, it's making the soil better at holding on to good stuff.
Exactly, exactly. And they talk about like using manure with biochar
Okay.
to enhance the soil even further, composting. It's all about getting those different components to work together to create a richer soil.
A team effort.
Yeah, exactly. And for those who like to get really hands-on, they even talk about vermicomposting using earthworms.
Yeah, the worm composters.
Yeah. So the big takeaway here is that biochar, it's versatile. Farmers, home gardeners, they can all integrate it into their soil management.
So going back to those crop yields, the paper talks about how biochar actually contributes to that growth.
Right. It all comes down to nutrients. Biochar helps the soil store and cycle nutrients better. It increases the organic carbon content, which is like a reservoir for nutrients.
So more readily available for plants.
Yeah. And it improves the soil structure, makes it more porous, so air and water can move more easily.
Easier for roots to access everything.
Right. And they give specific examples, like using rice husk biochar. That can really boost the water holding capacity.
Which is huge these days, with all the droughts.
Definitely. And then there's the soil pH, how acidic or alkaline it is.
Yeah.
That's also really important for nutrient availability.
Yeah, for sure.
Biochar, it can help adjust the pH of acidic soils, makes them better for a wider variety of crops. It's all about balance, right? Creating that ideal environment.
Getting the sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly. And they even go into the chemistry, if you want to get really nerdy.
Breaking it down.
Yeah, like the fixed carbon, the volatile matter, ash content, all that stuff.
But even without getting too technical, the main point is you can tailor those properties of biochar to what you need.
Right. Which brings us to the different ways to make biochar, each with its own little quirks and advantages. They start with pyrolysis, which is a high-temperature process. You break down the biomass without oxygen. That's the most common method.
The classic method.
Exactly. And how fast that pyrolysis happens, that matters. Slow pyrolysis gives you more charcoal. Fast pyrolysis produces more bio-oil.
Okay, so the speed changes the output.
Right. And then they talk about gasification, which is another process, converts biomass into gas that can be used for fuel.
All right.
And you get biochar as a byproduct. It's got different properties, though.
Different from the pyrolysis biochar.
Yeah. They even get into some more specialized types of pyrolysis, like microwave-assisted pyrolysis, which basically uses microwaves to heat the biomass. It's like super fast pyrolysis.
Microwaving biochar, I like it.
It's pretty cool. And they lay out the pros and cons of each method, Gives you a good picture of the state of the technology right now.
They're really thorough.
Yeah, and then they move on to torrefaction, which is a lower temperature process. It makes the biomass more like coal.
Like turning it into coal.
Kinda, yeah. It improves the fuel quality. And then there's hydrothermal carbonization, kind of a newer method. It uses water under high pressure.
So you're cooking it in water.
Yeah, at moderate temperatures, though. And it turns the biomass into biochar. It's a good way to process wet biomass, like sewage, sludge, food waste.
Okay.
And that biochar, they often call it hydrochar. It's got some unique properties.
Actual hydrochar.
Yeah. And then they talk about retort carbonization. That one, it uses the flue gas from the conversion process to get higher temperatures.
To boost the heat.
Right. So it could be more energy efficient.
That's always a good thing.
Definitely. So the point is, the way you make biochar really affects the properties and how well it works for different things.
So you need to pick the right method for the right use.
Exactly. And it's not just the methods, it's also the stuff you use to make biochar, the feedstock.
Like what, wood chips,
Yeah.
stuff like that?
Yeah, wood chips, agricultural waste, different feedstocks give you different biochar.
Makes sense.
And the temperature matters too.
Right.
Higher temperatures usually mean biochar with more carbon, less volatile matter, so it's more stable. Good
Yeah.
for like long-term carbon storage.
Locking that carbon away.
Exactly. And how fast you heat it up, the heating rate,
Right.
that can affect how much biochar you get. And its porosity, the surface area, which affects how it interacts with soil and water.
It's complicated.
It is. It's a whole science. And researchers, they're always tweaking these things.
Trying to dial it in.
Yeah, to create biochar with the right properties. Okay, so after all that biochar production talk, they switch gears. Now they're looking at how scientists actually characterize biochar, like analyze its unique fingerprint.
Leaving it an ID card.
Exactly. It's not just one thing. Biochar is this complex material.
Have its own personality.
Yeah, exactly. And understanding those properties, that's key for knowing how to use it best. For soil, for filtering water, even for building materials.
So you're really breaking it down.
Yeah. So first, they look at the chemical composition, like the main elements, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, how much of each one, that affects how stable it is, its nutrient content, all that. Then they look at the inorganic stuff like minerals, things plants need, potassium, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium. And they also look for like contaminants.
It's like making sure it's clean.
Yeah, like heavy metals, things like that. And then there's the pH level. It can be acidic, alkaline, all depends on how it was made. That's important for knowing if it'll work with the soil.
Yeah, it'll fit in.
Right. And then there's the surface area, how porous it is. That affects how well it holds water, nutrients, even provides a home for microorganisms.
All those tiny creatures?
Yeah, and they talk about how scientists measure all this stuff, pretty high-tech stuff.
Like microscopes and lasers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, things like that. So it's not just the physical stuff. They also look at the functional groups, the chemical groups on the surface. Those affect how it interacts with water, nutrients, and other stuff.
It's getting complicated.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of chemistry. But basically, these functional groups, they're like little docking stations. They allow biochar to bind to different substances. That's important for how it holds onto nutrients, filters out pollutants.
So it's like a little chemical factory working on a tiny scale.
Exactly. And then they talk about thermal stability, which is like how resistant it is to breaking down.
How tough it is.
Right. That's important for its ability to lock up carbon in the soil, for climate change.
It's long term.
Yeah. So all these properties, they need to be carefully analyzed to really use biochar the right way.
It's fascinating how complex it is.
It is. It's like a whole universe in a little piece of charcoal.
So now they shift focus to how biochar affects the soil itself, the physical and chemical stuff.
Right. Adding biochar can really change the soil, like dramatically. Its structure, how porous it is, how much water it holds, even its color.
It's like a makeover for the soil.
Totally. They start with how biochar can improve the soil structure. It creates more space between the soil particles.
Like giving it some breathing room?
Yeah, better air circulation, water infiltration, drainage. It's especially good for compacted soils.
Where it's all squished together.
Right, so imagine like taking a dense soil and fluffing it up. They even show like numbers from studies. They measure how compacted the soil is and how porous.
Real data.
Yeah, and then they move on to water retention. Biochar, it's porous, it attracts water molecules.
So it acts like a reservoir.
Right. Holds on to water, slowly releases it to plants, huge in drought-prone areas. They show how it increases the water content in the soil.
It's like a sponge, but a high-tech sponge.
Yeah, exactly. And then pH, biochar can raise the pH of acidic soil so you can grow more types of plants. It's all about balance, making sure nutrients are available.
Keeping everything in harmony.
Right, and they talk about how biochar can keep the pH stable so it doesn't fluctuate wildly, That can really hurt plants.
They need consistency.
Exactly. And they've got data to show how it shifts the pH toward a more neutral range. So from the big picture of the structure down to the chemical composition, it's amazing how biochar affects the soil.
It's like a total soil revitalization program.
Yeah, it is. And now they take us to the microscopic level, the world of microbes.
The tiny world.
Yeah, so the soil is full of these microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, all these little creatures. They're super important for breaking down organic matter, cycling nutrients, all that.
Keeping the soil alive.
Right. And biochar, it can change those microbial communities, how many there are, what kinds.
So it's like changing the neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. They explain how biochar gives a home to those beneficial microbes. It's like a little shelter for them.
Keeping them safe.
Yeah. And they show how biochar can increase the number and the different types of microbes.
Makes it a more diverse community.
Exactly. And it can enhance the activity of soil enzymes.
Now, what are those?
Those are like proteins that speed up those biological processes in the soil, breaking down organic matter, releasing nutrients.
The little workers.
Right. Biochar gives them a place to attach so they can work better.
So it's more than just a home. It's like a job site.
Yeah, exactly. And they give examples like how biochar can increase the activity of enzymes that are involved in nitrogen cycling, breaking down phosphorus.
So making those nutrients more available to plants.
Exactly. And they talk about how biochar can protect those microbial communities, like if there are contaminants in the soil.
It's like shielding them.
Yeah.
Ah.
And they explore how biochar can change the way plants and microbes interact, encourage those good relationships.
Like playing matchmaker.
Exactly. So it's pretty amazing how this simple material, biochar, can change this whole intricate web of life in the soil.
It's like a tiny ecosystem.
Right. And speaking of plants, that's where they go next. How biochar affects plants themselves, how they grow.
So beyond the soil, it's affecting the plants directly.
Yeah. So we know it helps indirectly by improving the soil, but it also has these direct effects on plants. How roots develop, nutrient uptake, even their tolerance to stress.
Okay, interesting.
They talk about how biochar, it creates a good environment for roots to grow, because it's porous.
So more space for roots to spread out.
Yeah. Roots can go deeper, get more water and nutrients. It's like a guide for the roots.
Guiding them along.
Yeah. And they even talk about how biochar can trigger the production of these plant hormones. They promote root growth.
So it's like a growth stimulant.
Yeah, in a way. And that nutrient uptake. Biochar, remember, it improves that cation exchange capacity.
Oh, magnet.
Yeah, those magnets. So nutrients like potassium, calcium, magnesium, they're more available.
Righty, for the plants to grab.
Exactly. And they show how biochar can increase the uptake of these nutrients by different crops. So plants grow better, you get better yields.
It's all connected.
Yeah. And lastly, they talk about how biochar can help plants deal with stress. Drought, too much salt in the soil, heavy metals.
Like protecting the plants.
Right. They explain how it improves water retention in the soil so plants can handle drought better. And it can actually reduce the effects of heavy metals.
How does it do that?
It absorbs them so they don't get into the plant.
So it's like filtering out those bad things.
Exactly.
So from roots to leaves, biochar's got the plants covered.
Yeah. It's really amazing how much it can do. It shows how biochar can not only make soil healthier, but also help us grow food more sustainably.
So it's good for the environment, good for our food.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
This paper is packed with information. But it's really exciting to see how much progress scientists are making, understanding biochar and how it can change the way we grow things.
It's not just about getting more crops. It's about making the whole system better, more sustainable.
Yeah, for sure. And bringing it back to, why should people care about all these details, this science stuff? What does it mean for, everyday life?
Well, we all depend on soil, whether we think about it or not. Food, clothes, even the air. It all goes back to the soil.
Yeah, and with all the challenges we're facing, climate change, more people to feed, figuring out how to keep the soil healthy, making agriculture more sustainable, it's vital.
And that's where biochar comes in, right? It's like this multi-tool. It can help with so many things. Reducing waste, improving the soil, storing carbon. It can even help with drought, with pollution.
It's like a solution that works on multiple levels.
Yeah. Farmers, gardeners, even just people who want a better planet, We
Right.
can all benefit from biochar.
Imagine a future where, we're not just taking stuff out of the soil, but putting back in, regenerating it.
Yeah, building it up, not breaking it down. That's the power of biochar.
And that's what's so cool about this research. It's opening up all these possibilities, new ways of working with nature.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, let's recap what we learned.
Yeah, so we started with that big news about BluSky Carbon, their new project in Arkansas. That was a big signal, that biochar is getting more attention, more investment.
Right. And then we got to meet Dr. Prabha, the new science editor at Biochar Today. I think her enthusiasm for biochar is really contagious.
Yeah, definitely. And then we dove into that research paper, all those details about biochar, how it's made, how it affects the soil, the plants, the whole microbial world.
It really highlighted how complex biochar is. It's so much more than just charcoal.
Yeah, it's like a hidden world full of potential.
And it has the potential to really change things,
Hmm.
create a more sustainable future.
We hope this deep dive has given you a better sense of all that.
Definitely. And if you want to learn more, check out the show notes. We've got links to all the stuff we talked about.
And here's a final thought to ponder. As scientists keep learning more about biochar, what new uses might we discover? You know, what other possibilities are out there?
Could we use biochar to create stronger ecosystems, to clean our water,
Yeah.
maybe even develop new energy sources?
Who knows? The future of biochar is wide open.
It is. So keep exploring, keep learning, and until next time, thanks for joining us.